This tutorial will demonstrate how to remove and install square-spindled crank arms. I've based this tutorial on cranks attached to a sealed cartridge bottom bracket, but I'll be covering the loose bearing style in a future tutorial. To remove the bolt, you'll need either an 8mm Allen key or a 14mm socket wrench. To remove the crank arms, you'll need a crank puller, a 16mm open wrench, and an adjustable wrench. If possible, a torque wrench should also be used for tightening. In order to safely remove the right side, you'll have to shift the front derailleur into the smallest chainring, and then carefully remove the chain and rest it on the bottom bracket so that it doesn't interfere with the crank arm removal. Using the crank arm for leverage, loosen and then remove the tightening bolt with your Allen key or 14mm socket wrench. Be careful not to skin your knuckles on the chainring teeth. Before using the crank puller, make sure it is fully extended so that the internal driver does not extend past the external threads. Carefully thread the external threads of the crank puller all the way clockwise into the crank arm. Avoid cross-threading, which will damage the crank and prevent future removal. Once the crank puller is fully threaded, place the adjustable wrench on the external flats and turn the internal driver clockwise until it stops. Turn the driver clockwise using a 16mm wrench until the crank arm pulls free of the spindle. Repeat the same process to remove the left crank arm. Before reinstalling the cranks, wipe both the square spindle and the crank spindle fitting to make sure there is no dirt or grease on either surface. Now slide the right crank spindle fitting onto the spindle. Before installing the bolts, grease under the head and along the threads of both bolts. Thread the bolt all the way into the spindle threads. And torque the bolt to about 40 Nm or 305 to 390 inch-pounds. Set the chain back on the chainring and repeat the same installation procedure on the left side, making sure the crank arm is pointing opposite the right side.